Meeting to order. The clerk will call the roll.
Councilmembers Walsh.
Here.
Dean.
Here.
Engstrand.
Here.
And Councilmembers Edberg and Jones are absent, excused.
Thank you. Would you stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Next is approval of the minutes of the regular City Council meeting on August 10th, 2021. Are there any corrections to the minutes?
Second.
I have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Moving on to minutes of the budget work session on August 17th. Any corrections to those?
Move approval. Second.
I have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Moving on to approval of the agenda. Ms. Heinecker, you have a deletion and an addition.
I do. Thank you, Mayor. If I could, we're going to be deleting the presentation by Train Technologies. It's something that we'd like to see if we could do it in front of a full council, so we're going to delay that until September 28th. And then we'd like to add to the agenda if we could do it before Rice Creek Watershed's presentation. I hope you're okay with that. It's a brief presentation that we'll be adding by John Shannon from the Rotary Club. And the Rotary Club has been doing some research on some peace polls, and they'd like to just share with council some of the work that Community Services has done on that, and share some ideas about where it might be best placed. So that would be the first under visitors and presentations.
Thank you. Anything else? If not, I need a motion to approve the agenda.
So moved. Second.
I have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Well, Mr. Shannon, you're up. Come on down.
And we do have, oh, there we go. Kira's got it. So.
All right, so as Ellen said, I'm John Shannon. I'm from the White Bear Lake Rotary Club here in town. And one of the service projects we'd like to do for the community here is we'd like to put in 2 peace poles. Thank you. We'd like to put in 2 peace poles on city property here in White Bear Lake. And what is a peace pole? I think you all have a handout kind of describing what it is, so I won't go through that in detail. But this is an image of a peace pole. What they are is they're 8 feet tall. They say, "May peace prevail on earth." And they say that in 8 different languages. And we selected the languages of English, Spanish, Hmong, Russian, Mandarin Chinese, Korean, Ojibwe, and Oromo for these poles. And we were thinking that we would place one of them, with your permission, obviously, and your approval, at the Saputo shelter that Rotary helped put in a lot of service hours and helped build this past summer. And then it's right alongside Lake Lynx Trail. The other one in discussion, we're thinking maybe Railroad Park would be a nice location for this. And that way then a lot of people can see it. And the reason we chose those languages is because a number of those are commonly spoken here in White Bear Lake, and some others represent some other things that are important to Rotary. And so Rotary's been doing this for quite a few years. The very first one went in Japan many, many years ago, and there's over 200,000 of these spread throughout the world. My understanding is there's one in Minneapolis that's very nice, from what I hear. And we have not done this before here in White Bear Lake, and we thought it would be really appropriate. And we are going to put one also in Matamidi as well.
Do you want to?
Yeah, and Mayor and Council, and John, my apologies. So the Saputo location would actually, we'll talk to White Bear Township, being that it's at Bel Air Beach. But the second one, of course, which is appropriate because you're looking at the township as one, it looks like Matamidi as one, and then of course within the city. So
I'm glad you guys understand where all the lines are.
Well, and I would just like to add something too. We're sitting on Dakota land, so perhaps we ought to include the Dakota language.
We can change any language
I'm
you
just
would like.
thinking that's something that's...
if that is something you would prefer other than the Ojibwe, we could definitely do that. In addition
both.
to,
I
we
don't
could
care,
do
but
that.
I don't care.
I'm limited to 8. That's the only thing we're limited
Okay,
to.
but I just want, just to remind, we are on Dakota land
We could
in Ramsey County.
Yep.
So,
We could do Dakota on one and Ojibwe on the other.
possibility. So, as council, any questions? Because we're going to have to take this under advisement. So if you have any questions.
And just and I think, a little feedback on the location. Is there any different ideas the council might have as you look for a place that might be meaningful, or your comfort level with us looking at the potential for Railroad Park? I haven't yet. We just started communicating, I think, yesterday afternoon or this morning. Yeah, so we would need to work with Public Works to find out what might work best to make sure that we can make sure it's maintained well, and it's in an area that we can keep it looking great.
Yeah. So I had an opportunity to speak with our parks foreman, Andy Wiedeke. Railroad Park, actually, there's some locations within the park that would be very suitable for this. So if that is a choice of councils, that's definitely an option. That would be away from underground utilities and in an area that can be easily maintained.
Okay. Well, thank you for bringing this forward, and we will.
Thank you guys for your consideration and for your time.
And thank you for all Rotary does. We appreciate it.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun, and we appreciate all
You're a
you
good
guys do
group.
for us too. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, next we have Kyle Axtell from the Rice Creek. Connie, do you want to introduce from the Rice Creek Watershed District? Connie Talon.
Hi, Madam Mayor and Council. It's my pleasure to introduce Kyle Axtell from the Rice Creek Watershed District, and he's here tonight to talk about the Preby Lake Outlet Structure Replacement Project. But before he comes up, I just want to mention that I'm very appreciative of the partnership that we have with Rice Creek Watershed District and for all of Kyle's work on this particular project and many others, and that which includes a lot of his time on trying to piece together all of the puzzle pieces of the history of the original outlet structure that was built on Preby Lake many years ago. So with that, I will have Kyle come up.
Thank you, Connie. Thank you, Mayor and Council, for having me here today. Purpose of my visit is just to give you some background on the Preby Lake Outlet, or Preby Lake Outfall Project, as it was originally called, and talk about some maintenance work that we'll be doing. We've been working with city staff for, golly, it's almost been a couple years, I think, now getting to this point. So we're ready to, we are moving this project forward, and just wanted to share that with you. So. Brief outline of my presentation again. I will go through that history. We also completed a system condition assessment in 2020. I'll give you some highlights from that. Talk about what this project is, what we're planning to do at Preby Lake. Talk about what this might cost and construction timing, what to expect, as well as the benefits of the project, why we're doing this in the first place. Next slide. A little bit about the project location again. So Preby Lake, I assume everyone's familiar with that. It's over on the eastern side of town, just near White Bear Lake itself. It was created when that old farmland developed back in the 1960s. The photo on the screen here, it's a little hard to see. Preby Lake is right off to the left side of the screen there. And what we're talking about is the Preby Lake Outfall Project. It was built in 1979 and 1980, and it's kind of that series, the line with the series of pink triangles on that map. I wish I had a better map to highlight that, but it functions essentially to take runoff that all drains down to Preby Lake and convey that water from Preby Lake ultimately down to Halls Marsh in Birchwood Village, which then discharges into White Bear Lake itself. And we've got a picture there as well that shows the existing outlet control structure on Preby Lake, and then the location is kind of in the very north eastern corner of the lake is where that structure is located. Go to the next slide. So again, that farmland over there developed during the 1960s. A bunch of single-family homes had gone in, and very shortly thereafter, and I should say Preby Lake was actually excavated. It was just a wetland in the middle of the farm field at the time. It was excavated at that back in the 60s to create a water amenity for the development and the homes in that area. Very quickly after the development went in, there was routine severe flooding that occurred during large rain events. All the stormwater from the surrounding area was directed into Preby Lake, and it flooded a number of those homes there a number of times over the years, requiring pumping and all that sort of thing. So back in the early 1970s, then the city of White Bear Lake and Birchwood Village petitioned the Rice Creek Watershed District to undertake a project to create an outlet for Preby Lake and eliminate that major flooding concern. That was in 1976. A few years later, after some contentious back and forth, it was not a very popular project with the residents from the surrounding area, to my understanding, looking at the history. We did ultimately undertake a project in 1979, and it was completed in 1980. At the time, the project cost $600,000, which in 1980, that's about $2 million today. So it was a very expensive project, and that was originally paid for by special assessment to all the property that drained into that drainage area. So it was expensive for folks at the time. Many of the parcels were assessed between $400 and $600 a piece. Lakefront homes on Preby Lake were substantially more than that, as well as the commercial properties and other properties that had not yet developed at that time. So moving forward to today, there really hasn't been much work done on that system. It was constructed, it exists, and very little has been done with it since that time. The pipe itself in places is over 40 feet below ground. So it was largely, I could say it was largely forgotten over the years. There have been some failures with the outlet structure at Preby Lake. That's why we're here today to talk about it. And I know the city of White Bear Lake has spent some funds to maintain that structure over the years. Notably, it was in all of the record of the creation of that project, the word maintenance was never mentioned one time. We've scoured the documents, and it was never discussed as to who would take care of it after it was built. Anyway, so in 2020 then, in talking with city staff and trying to figure out what do we have here, what's going on, Rice Creek undertook, okay, we're going to take a look at this system, see what condition it's in, and see who's ultimately responsible for this. The system crosses from White Bear Lake into Matamidi, into Birchwood Village. We've got 3 cities, 2 counties. It makes no sense whatsoever for one of those or all of those municipalities to try and maintain this project. It's not really functionally possible. So the Watershed District has determined that it is a watershed district facility. It's been added to our watershed management plan with an amendment that we did earlier this year. So formally, it is our facility. Just want to be very clear about that. The nice thing about that condition assessment that our engineer completed last year is that we found that the pipe work is in very good condition for its age. So that's reassuring both to us and to the residents that rely on that drainage from Preby Lake, with the exception of that outlet structure at the lake. Again, it's failed multiple times. I know the city has done some repairs there, but the outlet structure, in our engineer's opinion, requires replacement. So next slide. There were a few locations where we have some obstructions in the pipe that were found. There's some of the photos. We'd actually videoed the entire length of the pipe. So there's some concrete in places. Notably, I think it's the picture on the right there. There's a manhole cover down in there. We don't know how that got in there. Don't know how we're going to get it out either. At this time, it's 40 feet below ground, so it's a 3-foot diameter pipe, so it'll be challenging. But when we have access to it and when we can work on those, we'll try and get those obstructions removed. They don't seem to be causing a problem at this point in time. Next slide. So here I have some diagrams just showing on the left-hand side of the screen. It's just the original engineering drawings of the outlet structure that was built in 1979. It's an old big concrete structure with some steel baffles around the side of it to keep trash and debris out of it. When we replace this, we're going to look at a more modern structure that's not out in the middle of the lake. It'll be in the bank, typical stormwater pond outlet that you might see with new construction today. It'll have an internal weir that will allow us to control water levels in the lake if we need to. The current outlet does not allow us to manipulate water levels in Preby Lake at all. So that's probably one of the big improvements that we'll be making with the outlet. As I mentioned before, the original project was constructed and paid for by special assessment. Given the relative low cost of this project that we're undertaking now to replace the structure, we're looking at probably about $80,000 total. It makes no sense for us to try and do another special assessment for such a small sum of funds. It would raise just the cost of processing the special assessment, would add double-digit percentages to the project cost. So we're not going to do that. Our Board of Managers has elected to fund this through our ad valorem general levy. So residents in the area will not see a special assessment for this. We had a public hearing on July 14th. It was, I would say, fairly well attended for one of our public hearings. A number of residents from the lake area came and spoke. We had a couple of folks from Birchwood as well. Most of the comments regarding this had to do with water quality issues in Preby Lake, which we are aware of. It's been suffering for a number of years with low water quality. It is on the state's impaired waters list. So that was the bulk of the concerns that were voiced, is, you know, how does this relate to water quality? And I'll touch on that in a moment. I will note that if we had to do a major repair to the pipe system itself down the road, that would incur large cost. Our board potentially could look at a special assessment for other major repair of this system, although that's not contemplated at this time. Our access route is narrow. There is a drainage easement between the two homes that are shown there, 2710 and 2716 Riviera North. We've been in touch with both of those homeowners, but we will have to take heavy equipment right between their homes down the lot line and through the backyard. So it's the only way to get to the site. We are planning to construct this project this winter when ground is frozen. Take a couple weeks probably in January or February. With restoration of the site and revegetation in this next spring. As I mentioned, we are in direct contact with both of those homeowners. They understand what's going on and seem to be quite happy that the project's happening. So fortunately, they're working with us there. And then talk about the benefits of the project. So again, we're trying to reduce the chance of structure failure. You know, if that outlet structure goes, the lake can drain out. I think almost completely. It might leave about 1.5 feet or 2 feet of water in the lake. That's happened before. We don't want that to happen again. The new design, we think, will actually reduce the amount of trash and debris that leaves Preby Lake and goes into Hulls Marsh, which is another DNR protected wetland downstream. So a little easier to maintain at this outlet structure. And then I mentioned earlier briefly that we'll gain the ability to manage water levels here, and that goes to the water quality piece. Replacing the outlet structure itself doesn't really do anything for water quality. It's a flood control project. It's infrastructure repair. But with the increased algae blooms that we've seen and just the prevalence of rough fish, bullheads, fathead minnows that are in the lake that contribute to the algae blooms, we feel that a winter drawdown of the entire lake over the winter, so it freezes out completely, will have some water quality benefits for the lake, both through rough fish management. We can freeze those fish out, those undesirable fish species out, consolidate the organic sediments that are building up in the bottom of the lake over time, help improve the native plant community that's there. Those are all things that potentially can improve water quality. It's not a guarantee, but it's something that we can try, and it's really no cost. It'll also allow the city access, when we do that, access to maintain its storm sewer outfalls into the lake. While the water's down, you know, there are sediment deltas that are building up in the lake from the stormwater outfalls. So we can work together and plan accordingly and see if that can happen at the same time. Next slide. So we talk about drawdown. In an ideal world, we would draw the whole lake down this winter. Our default option, however, is just to create a cofferdam around the area of construction and do some localized dewatering to remove the old structure and install the new one. That's real standard work, standard DNR permit processing. We would prefer to do that whole lake drawdown. Again, because it's less expensive, it'll allow all this other work to get done, and we get that water quality piece hopefully out of it. In order to do that requires additional public hearing, and we actually have to get 75% of the landowners on the lake to sign off in writing that they approve that action. Preby Lake is a DNR public water. We feel we probably could get to that point. However, hit next slide. We're not going to do that this winter. In consultation with DNR staff, there's timing requirements and permitting, and we don't feel that there's enough flexibility in the DNR regulations and guidelines right now to allow that to happen in time for this winter. So we are going to go with just that local drawdown piece. It was a big question that some of the residents had. We know that there is some opposition to that out there, although most folks we've talked to seem to be okay with trying that for a year. But if there are any questions about it at the city level, we're not going to be doing that drawdown this winter. So once we get the new structure in place, we can look at it in the future as a water quality project, but it'll be just that. So with that, again, just wanted to give you an update of where we're going, working in the city, and answer any questions you may have.
Thank you. Councilmember Walsh.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So there's no pumps. Are we talking pure gravity? I mean, because it's quite a distance to move the water. Is it just grade and gravity?
That is correct. It is positive grade from Preview Lake all the way down to Halls Marsh. And like I said, there's a lot of topography in between there. And there's at one point, the pipe is 42 feet below ground.
Wow.
So we don't want to have to dig that up again.
Okay, well, I think we've got, thank you so much for coming and sharing this with us. And for those that are at home, I hope they've heard this so they know what's going to go on too. So thanks so much. And we like the partnership too.
Yes, thanks for having us.
And I forgot to mention that our city attorney is here via Zoom.
Oh.
Mr. Gilchrist is with us. He didn't leave us alone, so he's with us via Zoom. And it's my fault. I meant to mention that.
I feel so much more comfortable now. Oh, just, you know.
I was so worried, right, that something terrible was going to happen. Well, you never know. Let's be prepared. So tonight we'll move on to the Land Use 6B non-consent consideration of a planning commission recommendation for approval of a request by Bree LLC for an interim use permit for the first floor office space at 4701 Banning Avenue. Ms. Kane.
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor, members of council. This represents the final step of a long process that started out with a variance request that was hesitant, but I'm pleased to say that the City Council was able to direct staff to find a way to make it work on an interim basis. And therefore, we did not only take the text amendment, but a special resolution for this particular interim use permit to the Planning Commission at their June meeting. The text amendment was approved by council last month, and it was an oversight on staff's part that this wasn't on the same agenda. As you may know, the tenant had moved in as of June of this year, so there was no delay on the private business. But it was a 5-1 vote with some dissension, not only from a Planning Commission member, but a business owner within the downtown who expressed some concern. And regarding the widespread application of this, I will say we have not had any further inquiries on the use of the interim permit. And to Councilmember Edberg's concern, you will see in condition number 2, it's very clearly stated that the use shall terminate no later than June 1st of 2023. And then up on the screen, you can see the extent of the non-retail use that occupies the first floor over the 30% maximum through this IUP. And I would be happy to answer any questions that you may have for me.
Thank you. Council, any questions? It's too bad the applicant isn't here with us tonight. Well, no, I think it's important that they follow through.
Madam Mayor, if I may,
yes.
She did reach out to staff, and she's the one who really prompted that this needed to be on the agenda again, and I assured her that I thought I would be capable of answering any questions or concerns because the applicant has been at the public hearings and the meetings throughout the process, and I assured her that if I wasn't able to, we could just put it on the next agenda.
Thank you.
As I mentioned, there's no delay in the tenancy of the property.
So, Council, any questions for Ms. Kane? Mr. Bean?
I believe we already had questions answered in prior meetings.
Okay. It's your
You want a
award.
motion?
I'll move to approve.
I have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion?
Well, just
Councilmember Walsh.
To say it one more time, I think we've been really clear in our words. You know, if you look at legislative intent and now in the words of the resolution, that this is temporary,
Yeah, this
unique.
is a one-time only.
You know, that we're not heading this direction, so we can say it again before we take the vote. I know Councilmember Edberg would appreciate it if we said it one more time. And I agree with him. I agree with him. So.
All right. Well, with that, if there's nothing else, I will ask for all those in favor to say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Moving on to new business. 9A, resolution declaring cost to be assessed and ordering preparation of proposed assessment roll and setting hearing on a proposed assessment roll for the 2020, should that be the 2022?
2021.
Oh, 2021 pavement rehabilitation project. Mr. Copy.
So this is for this year's project, the 2021 roadway rehabilitation project. The next step in the public improvement process is to order a public hearing to have council consider the assessment rules for the project, as well as give property owners their opportunity to appeal any assessments they feel appropriate. So that is the next step in the process. The project is, as far as the residential areas, is complete. The two areas that we're waiting on to start after Labor Day are the Matoska boat launch parking lot, as well as the Lakewood Hills Park parking lot. Just to minimize disruption, but they're fine waiting on those because those are not part of the assessed project. That is 100% funded by the city, so we can move forward with this assessment hearing as all of those areas are complete. So with that said, staff would recommend that council adopt the attached resolution that would order that public hearing for consideration of the assessments for the 2021 street rehabilitation project.
Thank you. Any questions?
Move to approve.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? If not, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Moving on to the consent agenda.
Move approval.
I have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Moving on to 11A, discussion reinstatement of utility bill late payments. Ms. Heinecker.
Thank you, Mayor and members of the council. As outlined in the memorandum that was provided or put together by our finance director, Carrie, we wanted to revisit and have some discussion about reinstatement of our late fees that we suspended last year in response to, at that time, concerns about the economic condition of families and their ability to pay their utility bills on time. The practice of having a late fee has been a longstanding practice of the city, and again, that was meant to be a temporary suspension of that, and we are looking for some direction from council relative to their comfort level of us just putting those back in place as they had been prior to that suspension early January. One thing that's interesting of note is that you can see, and I don't know that it correlates to anything particularly other than if you look at our 2021 numbers of accounts that have been late actually is less than it had been back even in 2018. So we don't see that we have more and more people, at least this past year in the preceding months, that have not been able to pay their bills. The numbers have actually gone down since 2018. So, we're not taking action tonight, and we just wanted to get some feedback and then certainly bring something back to council for action if there is interest in revisiting that.
Thank you. Questions? Councilmember Walsh.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Related but not related is the CARES Act funding that we set aside for individuals or families, residents. We still had money in that grant program for individuals. Yep. Is that still kind of open, active? Have we closed that? I mean, that could be related to this. If people are having issues in the community, that is causing late fees.
Certainly.
That fund is still available. I don't remember what the status of that is.
Yes, thank you, Mayor, Councilmember Walsh. So we still had set aside, if council recalls, there were monies that we were able to transfer out it's dedicated to any additional assistance that we feel that we might need to provide to residents as we proceed forward, and in our economic development fund. That's where it's sitting, and it's isolated and designated for additional assistance as the council may see fit.
So it's not, the program's really not open?
Correct.
But we could if we
Correct. Yes, the program is, and I think the county's program is also, and you may know, I'm pretty sure that has also been sunsetted.
Yes, I believe both. So the city worked in partnership with CAP, Ramsey County CAP, and the initial allocation was fully spent down after it was extended, you may recall, into the first quarter of this year to allow residents to take advantage. But there is, I believe, some additional care funds still available if we wanted to reinitiate that, but that previous contract has expired.
You guys tell us, if there's need.
Sure. And at this time, Mayor and Council, we would advise Council to reinstate the fees and then see how we have the ability again. Of course, if we think that things are going downward, I think last year, of course, was for every reason we all know was very uncertain, and we know that there are still families out there that need assistance as they do any other year, and then we would continue to work with them, and there are other programs at the county that we can get them connected to. But this particular suspension of fees was very specific to last year's COVID emergency.
Councilmember Bean, you had a question.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I just want a clarification. The late fee was suspended, therefore never collected, but the bill itself is collected at some point, or is supposed to be collected at some point.
Thank you, Mayor, Councilmember Breen. That's correct. Yes. So and again, we don't have a resolution. We just wanted to get some feedback. I think that we'll go ahead and we'll bring it back to council then for consideration.
Yes. Okay. Sounds like a plan. Moving on to 11B, vacation of 5th Street between north side of Clarence Street south to north side of Whitaker Street. Vacation.
This is mine, Madam Mayor,
okay.
members of the council, and I'm glad it's on a short agenda because this is quite a complicated matter. It's about 44 years old and came to us in pieces as we have been working with heirs of the Rose Tice parcel, which is the large property located at 1788 Highway 96, immediately adjacent to Columbia Park in the township, as well as adjacent to previously vacated 5th Street Avenue. I will say it's a north-south right-of-way. A member of the engineering department brought it to my attention late this afternoon with palpitations that we were vacating 5th Street with many numerous homes on it. That is not the case. Details matter, and I apologize for the confusion, but this is just simply a referral matter. And as outlined in staff's report, back in 1977, the residents that abut the 5th Avenue right-of-way along both the Tice parcel and the city-owned parcel to the south of it. These two parcels. So these homeowners petitioned the then city council to vacate the eastern half of that, which was originally dedicated as part of the Ramalley plat. So that would be 30 feet, which is outlined in both blue and red here. The blue was approved by the City Council in 1977 because there was never any intention of extending that street at that location. At that time, the City Council did not want to make a decision and did not approve vacation of that shown in red, south of the north line of Clarence down to Whitaker. And several weeks later, the city attorney at that time recognized this error and filed an affidavit with Ramsey County, acknowledging the mistake of recording the wrong resolution, erroneously vacating that shown in red here. That sat dormant since 1977 until some conversations and some recollections, actually, of the sons of Rose Tice, who remembered their father being quite upset about some ongoings at City Council in the 70s. And with our engineering department doing a little digging, we were able to find some minutes of meetings, et cetera, and the affidavit, working with Ramsey County as well as a title researcher, all paid for by the Tice property heirs. So we are here tonight to simply bring this matter to the attention of the council and explain or kind of revisit Vacation B, which was in 1977 determined by the council at that time not to be in the interest of the public. And what the Tice heirs would like, and what staff believes is appropriate, is to retain the street end right-of-ways of both Clarence and Park Street, shown in yellow, which I believe jumps out pretty well on that screen, to assure public access not only to the Tice parcel at 1788, but also the city-owned parcel to the south. And that vacation, or that revisiting that vacation of the right-of-way would trigger another public hearing. But we really wanted to discuss it with the council, get your feedback, get some direction before we go ahead and schedule that public hearing. Many of the neighbors along Clarence, seeing action out there, knowing the Tice family over the years, have called with some questions and concerns. And always, a change in what they perceive as open space at the end of their street, which has been owned and paid for taxes by Rose Tice over the years. So we would be looking for direction from the council this evening to proceed with the public hearing at a subsequent or future city council meeting. This is a complicated matter, as I indicated. I hope I've laid it out pretty clearly, and it would be the intention of the heirs of the Rose Tice parcel to carve it into, they want to retain the existing home on 96, so that northern portion would be subdivided off, and I'm not tall enough. But that lot line would extend and would be a complying lot within the R4 1 and 2 family zoning district, and then create 4 new lots to the south, likely through a planned unit development, because it will trigger stormwater management, as well as a cul-de-sac that will need to drain into that stormwater management feature, and so a planned unit development rather than a straightforward 4-lot subdivision would be appropriate. And I would be happy to answer any questions. It's been
Councilmember Walsh.
So that means we're talking Clarence Court here? I mean, that's going to be through Clarence into the cul-de-sac? I mean, because you're not going to access from 96.
correct. Clarence would be extended to the west with a cul-de-sac bulb.
And then access to those new...
For newly created 1 and 2 family duplex lots that comply with the existing zoning. It is consistent with the current zoning. It is consistent with the current comprehensive plan land use designation.
Well, this family's been pretty patient if this occurred in 1977.
One other question, Madam Mayor. The remaining red-lined areas, I thought in the memo you talked about doing something with those too. Is that a separate issue? But we're going to sort of give that back? I couldn't quite understand what
Yeah, great. Thank you for clarifying that. Madam Mayor, Councilmember Walsh, it would be staff's intent to, while the council back in 1977 was not in a position to vacate those portions shown in red, it would be staff's recommendation at this time to now vacate that portion of Fifth Avenue, but retain the yellow portions as right-of-way extensions for public access or extension of streets and utilities.
So when we say vacate, does that make their lots bigger? I mean,
Yes.
is that what we're talking about?
Yep.
So
Yes. And I will say what has been, Madam Mayor, Councilmember Walsh, it's been very difficult for us to determine when this mapping error occurred. And I think it was resolved in 1977 and then somehow reappeared in our GIS mapping through Ramsey County in the last 20 years, and without finger pointing, because it very easily could have just, a Scribner's error.
do you think the residents along those lines believe that's their property?
Yes.
And sort of used it as
Yes.
their property?
Yep. Yes.
So this would just be acknowledging
This would
that?
just
Yes.
legalize it.
Yeah.
Yep. But I also suspect we'll hear some concerns about the vacation of not vacating the Park Street and Clarence Street right-of-way, the 30 by 30 tabs. I will say that those property owners since 1977 have been under the impression
They were theirs.
that was their property.
I'll have to walk over there and look.
Okay.
And all we're asking for this evening is direction to proceed with a public hearing at a subsequent city
Well,
council meeting.
I think you have to. Yes, I think it has to be done.
Great.
So,
Thank you very much. We
Is
will
that,
proceed
Council,
in
you
that
in
direction.
agreement?
Final question, why are we not going to do it on Hinckley then, just in case that parcel gets split someday or something? Why wouldn't we?
Thank you. Great question, Councilmember Engstrom, Madam Mayor. That just directly leads to wetlands, and it's already city-owned property to the north and south, and there's no public access that's really encouraged through that, what is called a paper right-of-way. It's not
Can't be
improved.
split later if Bill Walsh decides to sell that property because the city doesn't need it anymore?
Net gain, I love it. You're on it.
Who knew?
You could sell swampland.
You're selling swampland?
I don't know. Let us explore the merits of retaining that right-of-way, should we ever want. With the lowering of water levels across the region, perhaps those parcels might dry out and become buildable. So it's a good idea to let us explore that further and discuss it, and we'll bring that back. Thank you.
All right. Well, now we come to communications from the city manager, Ms. Einiger.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Just a few brief updates. First, I want to call attention to the census update that I provided and put it on the dais for council members. Received that recently. They just came out right after we had some discussion at our work session, and boom, I think the next day we actually received them. We knew to expect them soon. There is still some data that we want to drill down into that would be specific to White Bear Lake that isn't yet available. So this is the summary that we have yet at this point. We will certainly, as we get more detail available to us, it would be, I think, worthwhile to even have just a brief presentation to just lay out sort of what the census shows relative to changes in our community. But you can see on that first page, that's that summary of census redistricting data. The number of households has gone up, and our population has gone up about 1,100 people. But our persons per household has gone down statistically. So I think that's interesting and not unexpected. That's what we did anticipate. And also our demographics are changing as we also anticipated, and I think very noteworthy. And so I'll just let council, you can review that, but we will when we have opportunities to get a bit more of the details for our census for White Bear Lake. We'll bring back a brief presentation to council, and we can and give that to you. But nevertheless, I wanted you to see at least what we have at this time. So that's what that is. And then also just so some of the council's been involved more than others, but as a mayor and council know, we've been involved. We're in our third year of being involved in part of the Climate Smart Municipalities program. It's a program that we have been in partnership with cities in Ludenscheid, along with not Ludenscheid, Germany. Ludenscheid is our city. Cities in Germany, along with other communities in the state of Minnesota, and also the state of Minnesota itself has different departments within the state have also been participating in this program. This year was to be our last year, at least within the grant that's provided by the Federal Republic of Germany for our participation and the other communities as well. And I'm sorry, last year was to be, but then COVID struck, so there was no delegation that was sent, and it really wasn't until probably about 4 weeks ago that we got confirmation that while the delegates from Germany are unable to travel here due to restrictions that are still in place for traveling, they did extend the invitation for the participating cities to go and have another return trip to our partner city in Ludenscheid. So we quickly were able to put together another delegation. We are happy to announce that we have very, very eager participation from the school district and are excited to be part of this. That really is one of the key partnerships that I know that City of Ludenscheid was looking forward to. We will also have representation from council, as we did last time. Council members Edberg and Dagmin will be attending, and then we have staff also that will be attending. And just to remind those who are listening and to our council that we are grateful for the partnership that's being coordinated actually by the University of Minnesota through a grant actually that's made available through the Federal Republic of Germany. It's important to note that this program, again, it wasn't until recently that it's like, okay, we can send a delegation there, and a lot of it was sort of last minute on behalf of the U of M and their ability to plan and coordinate this. The impact will be for us that we'll have a smaller council representation at our next meeting, but they'll come back and be able to let us know. Yeah, right. So plan ahead.
Dan will be back. It's all good.
Yeah, but really excited about the infusion of enthusiasm from the school district and being a participant in this, and I think we'll get some great things will come back from that. I will not be attending because of my own plans to be done at the end of the year, and I thought it would be better that we had staff that will be here next year there so they can carry on
And I won't
and do
either.
the work.
I'm not going
Yes. So anyhow, looking forward to hearing about how what they learn and how that goes, but that's going to be September 11th, I think is the date of departure coming up. And then lastly, I think I'll leave this to Ann to give an update on the housing task force. And I think for me, I'm going to just pass it on to the two of you.
Okay.
Thank you. As you know, our department has been working with a housing task force over the last 8 months or so, and we're seeing the end of the light at the end of the tunnel. And we just have a handful of more meetings. We will be distributing a packet with draft recommendations to the task force itself, and we also plan to distribute those recommendations to the council this week, ideally Friday. So look for that packet. And they are scheduled to meet next week to once again revisit those draft recommendations before the September 9th Community Housing Forum Part 2, which at this date and time we are planning to hold live on September 9th at the White Bear Lake Area School District Center in their boardroom. And in addition to that, for those who are not comfortable or unable to attend in-person meetings, we have a supplementary online community housing forum scheduled for a couple weeks later on September 20th. So you will be receiving updates on those community-wide meetings that will be followed up with surveys so that we can really hopefully get some input from a broader sector of the community rather than just those that serve on the housing task force. We anticipate that those review of the recommendations will be presented to the council in October and tentatively plan to bring the final report to you in November. When the book closes on that recommendation, and it doesn't really close, it's just going to start development of a whole lot more programs, policies, and efforts, then we really need to transition into the County Road E planning effort. You may recall that last year we did receive a grant from Ramsey County in the amount of $25,000 to work in partnership with Vadnais Heights, Gem Lake, and the City of White Bear Lake on a multi-jurisdictional corridor study for the County Road E corridor. And due to COVID last year, we just delayed that because we were really hoping to really have significant community input and direction from an advisory council on that. So we need to at least initiate the planning effort this fall. So look forward to perhaps in November or December seeing something from us so that we can demonstrate to the county that we are intending to move forward on that effort and get underway with our partner communities on that planning project. So in addition, I think we'll also have some of the findings of the ACE study, that the arts culture and education study that was another planning effort that was underway this year that we will be bringing to the council later this fall as well.
Mm-hmm.
So
lots of studies.
Yes, lots.
Good. I have one more thing.
Yes, please.
But I'll defer, Paul, did you
Mr.
have something
Copper,
that you wanted
anything?
anything to?
The only thing that I have to add is just to remind the council and public that we're still in a drought. We keep getting correspondence from the Minnesota Department of Natural Resources to continue to remind our residents to minimize outdoor use. water for sprinkling and pools and things like that. So anything that our residents can do to help in this situation is greatly appreciated. And go to the city's website. We have some information on there and links to the DNR website to find more information on drought and what residents can do.
Thank you. I wanted to also just let council know, you will see we needed to put a public hearing notice in the paper based on some deadlines that are outlined and statutorily related to the Whitaker Street end, which is something that I know we've been anticipating and talking about at the council level. So we received information from MnDOT I think it was mid-last week we were talking to them, and they've completed the layout and design work for the pedestrian improvements and traffic signal improvements at Whitaker Street, which would be the addition of a signalized intersection, which is something I think
It's been a long time in the works.
Pretty excited about. But what it does do is typically, because it's MnDOT right of way, typically they have their project and we would be informed and whatnot. But it does anything that involves closure of access to a property, which would be that driveway access that comes off of Highway 61 just north of the intersection into the meat market property. For safety reasons, which will be best described by those doing the presentation, there would need to be a closure at that area, and then state statute requires that the presiding municipality then hold a public hearing to allow for that closure.
Permanent closure?
Permanent closure, yeah. So it's also very detailed in terms of our timeliness, in terms of our response to that. So there's like 15 days by which we need to respond and to schedule a public hearing, and then you have 30 days to hold the public hearing. So we'll land on September 28th. That's going to be a really busy night. We may even just want you to know we'll have a lot of things on that agenda, because we also have our preliminary tax levy that we'll be considering. So it will be a very busy night. I had hoped we could try to schedule it for a later date. It's just the timing of that statutory schedule. It just is. So I'm sorry that we're piling a lot on one night. But nevertheless, it will be informative in terms of plans for that. You'll get information in your packets in advance to see what that layout is. But if meanwhile you have questions and you'd like to see that, we have now received it. And we can certainly share that with you or anyone else that would like to. And they are also, because this is our direct project, they're working with adjacent property owners that would be most directly impacted, of course, the idle property and the Runtrack property. Another improvement that isn't part of the public hearing we'll talk about it, but there's some significant stormwater improvements that they'll be able to describe too that will go into that area as well. So I just wanted council to know that's coming, and also just to forewarn you that the 28th, like you said, bring a snack. It's going to be a long one. So with that, I think I'm done.
I just have one thing. I would just like to compliment Mr. Copy and the Public Works and everything for getting the gazebo done. It's lovely. We had a lovely ribbon cutting, and it's so nice to see it back in its splendor again. So thank you for shepherding that through. We appreciate it. So with that, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Okay, we are adjourned.
We should vote.
Oh, I have to vote.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, we'll never get out of here.
Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Nope.
Well, we're overruled.
You didn't.
We are adjourned.